We'll start with the Yankees, who kind of, I guess, surprisingly took 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox this weekend. They hadn't defeated the Red Sox at all coming into this series. And they did so without a lot of their key players. Aaron Judge, obviously on the COVID list. Gio Urshela, another guy on the COVID list. Luke Voigt's hurt. Clint Frazier's hurt right now. And the list kind of just keeps going. And then even replacement outfielders like LeCastro and Ambergy, I think is how you say it, going down this weekend as well in the outfield. So the Yankees did it this weekend. They won 2 out of 3 despite all of those injuries that I just talked about, or guys being out of the lineup. So I'm going to ask you to remove that Red Sox bias, Jack, here. And I want you to look at this series. And what do you take away from the Yankees standpoint this weekend?
Well, I feel like so many times in this somewhat disappointing, very disappointing Yankees season, there have been these instances where the Yankees feel really close to rounding a corner and then something terrible happens. Guy gets injured or they have a terrible loss. And I think you can look at the Astros, series right before the All-Star break, as one of those situations. You win 2 games against them, one of the best teams in the league, and then you have a horrible game 3 that just, deflates all confidence in the team. And I think that you can look at this series as something similar to that without, that bad thing happening. I think they might be close to, potentially rounding a corner because you go up against your division rival. This is one of the best rivalry in sports. And, with all odds against you, everyone either injured or on the COVID IL, and, you take 2-3 games with, I read an article this morning. Will the Yankees be able to replace Ambergy? And I think between the 3 of us, we got to figure out how to pronounce the guy's name before we figure out how to
not a
replace
headline we expected to see
so,
going into the year.
if I'm a Yankees fan, I'm confident in the results this weekend. And, I think some of these new faces almost remind you a little bit of the core that they brought up, when they were dealing with injuries a few years ago. You've got guys like Gio Urshela coming in, and I think that the Yankees are somewhat getting into a good place, so we'll see how things go from here.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the Astros series before this, Jack, and just, coming into the break, I might say. The Yankees won 5 of their last 7 games. They looked at a good place. They had a good series against the Mariners, but they just kept dropping the 3rd game of the series. So they couldn't win a series, but they won those last 2. And of course, the last game against the Mets before that. So, it looked like things were good for them. So, to me, from that perspective, it wouldn't be incredibly surprising that they were able to have a successful series against the Red Sox. This just seems to be a momentum shift in their favor. COVID stuff, not great for their momentum. A lot of guys you'd love to have, Aaron Judge chief among them, in your lineup, and not lose them for COVID reasons. But that's just the reality of things. And I think when your team is in the right place mentally, you can overcome those obstacles and still win a series. And to me, that seems to be what the Yankees were able to do this weekend. They got a good performance on Sunday by Garrett Cole. The offense showed up on Sunday also. Like they're able to overcome these things because their identity as a team seems to finally be taking shape here early in the season on July the 19th.
Yeah, the pitching, I like that you mentioned that because that was basically tremendous this weekend, and they've been very good lately. And in this stretch where they've started to win series, like we've talked about, maybe not sweep, and maybe teams they should have swept, like the Mariners, and then a game they should have won against Houston right before the break. But to win 2 out of 3 here, it shows a couple things. To me, it shows that maybe this Yankees team is finally starting to show some consistency, which they've lacked all year. And like I've talked about this many times on this very podcast, how the Yankees don't need to go out and win and make up their 8-game deficit in one night. It's a long process. They dug themselves in a very deep hole. And for them to get out of it, they have to get momentum and they have to win series consistently. And 3 in a row is very good. And we don't want to overreact because we've done it before where we've seen the Yankees win series and then all of a sudden they take a step backwards, kind of like Jack was talking about. But for me, with the talent that they did it with this weekend is why I'm a lot more optimistic. I would say with them, and I think some of those guys like Greg Allen, for example, in the outfield, and Ryan Lamar out there as well. Um, those guys just brought a certain young, or I guess bench energy that maybe this team needed. Maybe it's something that they can kind of use as a source of momentum, instead of the same old guys every night, kind of just taking one step forward and two steps back. So maybe just this is a sign, and I think it's a really important stretch upcoming here going forward to keep this going, to continue to win series and continue to build on that consistency. That way, when Judge and Urshela come back, and even like Luke Voigt comes back, and some of the other players from the COVID list as well, once those guys come back in the starters, they can feed off that momentum that these bench players like Greg Allen and like Lamar and like Ambergy even have brought.